I work with a lot of people who struggle with having too many ideas. And I think the biggest advice I tend to give people is to really understand that you don't need to do all of them.
What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others.
Are you interested in having Rick speak at your event or business? Here is what others have to say.
Did not know his story, and it was so inspirational, and his presence on stage, his authenticity was just incredible.
I absolutely loved his performance. It made me feel some type of way.
If you're looking for a speaker for your next event, hire Rick. I promise you this, you will not be disappointed.
Visit rickornelas.com to book him today.
Welcome back, Impact Heroes. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to our latest iSpark Change social impact hero, and she is a special one. She is a true hero of social impact who has been called to create mass change. She's driven, passionate, and has devoted her life to making the world a better place. Sounds like someone kind of I know very well. Her work with nonprofits has helped transform lives and heal communities. In fact, those she's helped have said every conversation with her is like a shot of vitamins and full of golden nuggets. She's a social impact strategist, coach, and consultant with over a decade of experience in the field who can give you the secret recipe to create a legacy of social change by unlocking the power in your ideas and your lived experience. That sounds amazing, by the way. So please welcome the authentic, driven world changer, Wendie Veloz. Wendie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And yes, we do have a lot of things in common, don't we?
Yes, we do. So that's why I kind of got a kick out of putting together your intro, because I was like, oh, this verbiage all sounds very familiar. You know?
We've long since known we are friends because we use similar words, but we also have very similar beliefs.
Very similar missions and causes and everything. So yeah, and when we connected because you, if I remember correctly, you found us on social media and said, hey, this looks like what I'm doing, and very interested and reached out, and that was a great connection. So
absolutely. People tell you to do competitor research. And in this space, there aren't really competitors because we're all actually supporting different people in very similar ways. And so I found that concept of competitor research really is me making friends.
Yes, very, very true. Very true. I know I've done the same thing over the past 3 years, and I just connected with people from all over the world, made friends with people from all over the world that I guess you could consider that research, but yeah. Anyways, well, we'll have a great time today. We'll have a good organic conversation, and I know that my audience will get plenty of value from hearing what you have to say. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you in advance. So, obviously you're on the show because I see you as someone that is spreading positive change in the world, someone that whose actions make a positive impact on humanity, what we call a social impact hero. And we'll get through that definition as the show goes. But I want to ask the question I always ask everyone, if you've heard the podcast, is, do you view yourself as a hero?
I struggle with that because I think I'm just a regular person doing my purpose, right? What I'm here to do or what I'm called to do. And if that makes a hero, then I guess, what I've called people is badass change agents, right? And so I have my own concept of that as well. And I think that to me, either one of these terms really means that it's someone stepping out into their purpose, and that purpose affects others in some way. And so, by that definition, yeah, I guess I would be a hero, but my cause isn't really to save the world or to change something so radically that, we don't really understand it anymore. And it's not really a salvation sort of mission. What my cause really is about is to make sure that other people are able to do those things. So I don't know if in a meta way, I guess I'm like a hero for the heroes in some weird way, which I think you are too.
Yeah, thank you. And that does make sense, because I think being in the position that you are, or that I am, when you go about looking to support others and help others, then, I mean, by my definition, that's heroic, but you're not looking for the spotlight. You're looking to raise others up. And that essentially is what's going to make the world a better place, which I know is important for both of us. Exactly.
And in that mission, there is some altruism, and there also is some, self-fulfillment that we feel. But a lot of the times for me, I get the kicks out of seeing what other people can do, see what their passion is, or seeing how you can uplift their mission. And that's really what makes me feel like I'm serving my purpose.
Yeah. And that resonates with me a lot, because as a coach, as a leader and everything, I think that's one of our roles as leaders, is to see things that others can't see in themselves, and to help them grow, and to help them be better and become, whatever their destiny is, but they don't always see that. And so, if there's people like yourself that are able to bring that out in others, then that's a true, heroic gift in itself, being able to do that for others.
Yeah. And I like the idea that it's not about me. I think a lot of the times it's about the people who ultimately we're serving. And so it's not even about the people that I'm serving. It's really about the people that they're going to serve. Right. And so, always thinking about what is the ultimate goal of what we're doing, and how do we really show up to serve, and how do we keep showing up to serve? And that's a lot of what I've been working on for the last 2 years.
So I'd like to dive into where that comes from. I know you have your background, you have a master's in social policy work from Columbia, and, your undergrad in psychology, but so you've studied people, right? And you've studied people and how to work with people, but where did it come? Where did the desire to really have that social impact and to help others be better, where did that come from?
Yeah, I love to tell this story because it was really early on in my life that I realized I was a helper type, and I didn't really know what that would mean for the rest of my career or life trajectory, or even how I spend countless hours, doing this work. And I was a peer mentor in about 8th grade. And I signed up for this program that they have in middle school, where, you're working with the school psychologist, and they kind of match you with another peer to support them in some way. And I, get a little bit of training, get some, just to get your feet wet and understanding what you're supposed to do. And then you're sort of set off to go talk to people at lunchtime. And I had one particular peer that I was matched with. I had a really rough start in life, abusive home, not a great family situation, and probably lived in poverty. There was a lot of things going on there. And I remember just saying, well, this is so far from my lived experience. I have my own lived experience that had, dealt with poverty, lots of trauma in different ways, but didn't quite experience what she experienced. And I remember thinking, wow, I didn't know that people had these kinds of struggles. And what if you could alleviate that? What if you could create the conditions for people to thrive and for people to be happy and to live a fulfilled life and to not have these kinds of struggles? And what does that look like? And what does that mean? And I remember that intense curiosity, so young, drove me to do things in high school, like volunteer a ton or get involved in nonprofit work when I was in college, and to eventually go and work in nonprofits. And then, kind of has led me to the policy level to make social programs that were, actually trying to prevent these things and really focusing on prevention. And it wasn't really clear to me at the time when this was starting that this would set my life course, that this would really help me fulfill my purpose and what I'm here to do in this lifetime and on this planet. And it was just such a clear moment to me because I saw the struggle, one to one, and heard the words of another person. And that active listening, the ability to be empathetic, the ability to see something from another person's perspective and want to change it. That was the spark. As you talk about, I spark change. That was the spark for me for the rest of my journey. And I felt like as I was getting to understand that spark, there were sort of layers of an onion, right? That I had to pull back and really understand not only the human experience, but the communal experience of what's happening in our communities. And particularly in America, it can be some very traumatic things that have happened. And so as I've gone through this journey, I've learned how do you start addressing problems at the different layers that exist in that onion.
That's what stands out to me. It's interesting you use that analogy of the layers of an onion, because that's what stands out to me in what you were saying is that originally you were looking to help one individual, and then over time it became, more, and then even now you're trying to make the world a better place and help lots of individuals, or I guess expand the impact that people have so they can impact more lives. And so that getting to the outer layers of everything. So I want to start with the inside of that onion. Okay, I want to start.
Yeah. Got to start somewhere.
Where start for you? Because I caught something that you said. You said that the trauma that this peer that you were helping, that you said something to the effect of, how could someone dealing with this, you didn't realize that people had this, but you did say that you had your own trauma that you were dealing with. So what, and you don't have to get into, you can get in as much detail as you want, but what were some of the things from your childhood that you think, or your upbringing that you think really drove you to want to help others? Because I don't think you just signed up for this peer group just for fun. I mean, my guess is there was something that drove you there to want to help others.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in a single family household in Los Angeles. I'm very transparent about my childhood being definitely one where we battled with, money issues, didn't have my father in the picture very much. Now we've sort of reconnected and have a relationship. But at the time, there was a lot of interpersonal trauma in my family, long history of single mothers. So lots of absentee male influence. And, I lived in a multi-generational house. So the only male influence I had was my grandfather, and he was very well connected and supportive. And so the way I describe it to people is there's risk factors and there's protective factors. And so I had a number of risk factors or a number of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and as the research says. And those things were counterbalanced by my protective factors, which were my strong family ties. The people in my family were actually very loving, nurturing environment, very checked into, the fact that my mom was working long hours, but sometimes I would be with family members, or I had babysitters and other influences in my life that would help me go to extracurricular activities. So in my experience, I had both the protective factors and the risk factors. What I noticed over time is that a lot of the people that inspired me to do this work didn't have those protective factors. They didn't have the luxuries that I had of living in those types of conditions, but then having a counterbalance to help you really still thrive and get through those conditions. And I think that was what I really saw, was the absence of any kind of beneficial supports in this peer. And I said, wow, she can't go home and talk to her grandfather about the things going on, or she can't expect that there's going to be, somebody coming to the award ceremony. Like there's different things that I was experiencing that I could see were not available to others. And once I realized that, and then I eventually in my career, as I understood the research and more of what happens for folks, I said, well, in a really deliberate way, how can we bolster these protective factors? How can we start preventing these kinds of things from happening in the first place, so that when people do have, insurmountable risk factors going on in their lives, they can still find their way, and they can still find a purpose, and they can still thrive. And I think that over time, that really is what's driven me, from that initial look at my own life and the initial analysis that I did, where I figured out, like, I've got something going on here that other people don't have. And even if I have something that I feel like is difficult for me, I may not have it as bad as other people. And that's really what kind of made me think, well, I should give my time, because there are people who have things a little more difficult to deal with than I do. And if I can change that in some way, then that's a pretty good use of my time.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you were able to, at a young age, that you were able to come to that conclusion, because so many people, and in a situation where, you know, you're not in a wealthy home, or you have, you know, access to so many things, or, you know, as you described it. And I had a similar upbringing, you know, being the youngest of five, and you know, both parents working full time, my dad working 2 jobs, all this, I mean, just to put food on the table and everything. And the fact that you were able to, I guess, see the gifts that you had in your life, despite other things that were going on. I mean, so many people they, especially in today's world, with the constant, you know, comparison from social media and the internet, is so many people are focused on the lack that they have in their lives, and not the, you know, not the positives, and not the gifts that they have in their life, whatever, you know, however small, quote unquote, small they may seem by society standards, right? To have that, you know, those that positive support in your household. I mean, that was huge. That was huge. It seems like for you. And was there one individual? Was it your grandfather? You mentioned him a couple of times, or was there one individual that really stood out that was, you know, that rock of support for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting, because although I didn't have my father in the picture a lot, my grandmother on my father's side was in the picture. And then my grandmother on my mom's side, she actually passed away when I was very young. And so, and I'm named after her. So it was always this, I felt this absentee of the grandmother, but I had one of each, right? So I had my grandfather who lived with us on my mother's side, and then I had my grandmother who I would visit. And so those two influences, understanding the world, how it changed through their generation, how their story kind of evolved, and culturally how in the Latino household, how that grandparent as a parent situation sort of just tends to happen. There was a lot that I learned from them, and there was a lot that I took away from how they struggled, right? Like what their struggle was like was very different from my struggles. And it was something that I couldn't appreciate, because I didn't understand the world at that time that they were struggling. It was a very different world for their generation. And they would pass these stories on. And sometimes my grandfather would sound a little bit like Forrest Gump, because he just had all these, you know, fantastical stories. And when he finally passed away and we were able to sort through all of his personal effects, you know, a lot of them we thought were sort of fantasized and a little bit bigger than he would, you know, kind of elaborate more in details that were like, oh, was that really true? But then when we were able to dig back through his experience, a lot of things he actually didn't tell us, and they were true, but they were true in a way that, you know, we found medals from his army days and different things like that. And so the same thing with my grandmother when she passed away. And we dug back through her experience and her life. You know, there were struggles there that I never even knew about, that she was experiencing financially in other ways that, you know, during my lifetime, and I never knew. And so I think that those two were definitely my early heroes, just because it was something that, you know, when you're trying to understand lived experience, or you're trying to understand generational trauma and things like that, the stories are really where all that gold is. And so listening to the stories, having them there to share the stories with me, having them, especially later in life, you know, be able to tell me more vividly as I was an adult, you know, what that was like. I think that that was really important and pivotal to me over my life course, because it helped me sort of understand where I came from, and also understand, you know, what could I do better, or what could I do to have a different outcome. And I think that that was really important information. And, you know, I wish I had kind of cataloged that in a book and you know, gone depth interviews, had a podcast at that point, you know, all the things. But, you know, even just the pictures and the memories and all of the things that they've left me, it's just a wealth of knowledge. And so I've been able to kind of interpret some of that as I've gotten older. And that's been a really transformative and powerful process for me.
It sounds like it. I mean, it sounds like very much so. And it's interesting, as I asked that question, I had a feeling that they had an impact, you know, when you were young, but it seems like the impact has gone far beyond that to, you know, even to more current times, you know, and who you are and how you interact with others, and essentially how you show up. So I'm glad I asked that question.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And would you say that, you know, in that journey of learning about yourself, learning from those stories of others, family members and so forth. Would you say that helped you to, when did you really like solidify your purpose and figure out, or have you completely, solidified?
I was like, maybe yesterday, Rick. Maybe yesterday I figured it out, right? I think I spent a lot of years, and I know you talk about spirituality on your podcast. I spent a lot of years questioning God, asking like, what am I here for? What is the purpose of life? All these big esoteric questions, and really just trying to listen for the answer, but always listening for the how. Right. And I was always like, how am I going to, or, kind of in the judgmental day, why did you give me this mission? Like, what is this thing you want me to do? And how do I do it? Right. And then I was able to finally, about 2 years ago, just step back and say, I don't need to know the how, and I don't even need to know the why, but I need to know the what. What do you want me to do? And I think in that time frame, I was much more open spiritually to the answer, right? But I hadn't been for years, and I maybe wasn't listening or wasn't receiving the information the way that I'm capable of now. And when I finally kind of got to that place in my spiritual journey, I truly was able to step into my purpose, which is, what I'm doing now. But all along, it was a struggle. I mean, it was always like, let me go push myself to get this degree. Let me go push myself to live in Africa in a village. Let me go push myself to join the government and endure what I endured in that environment. For years, with all of the work trauma that happened there with me, and I always questioned, every single step of the way. I questioned my faith, I questioned God, I questioned my purpose. And when I finally stopped questioning was when I was able to hear the answer. But it wasn't until I was ready. Right. And so I kept wanting to be ready, or thinking I was ready, or seeking something that just I was not ready to receive. And then when I was finally ready and it was the right time, I was like, oh, it was like a weight lifted off of me. And I was just like, oh, this is what I'm here to do. OK, let me like get to work like I, normally do on my mission, but without that sense of longing for something that wasn't there. And once I was able to feel more confident and all of those things, then I was able to really start showing up in the way that I needed to fulfill the purpose, right? But it was after the years of questioning and wondering and feeling like I was missing something. But I finally feel settled now, which is, it's a great feeling, to be honest.
Well, yes, it is. And I can definitely empathize with what you're saying, because that was me for many years, is wanting, well, first not even really knowing how I could create purpose in my life, but then wanting to know the how and wanting to know, it wasn't about the what, like you were saying. And I think in my case, I mean, it took COVID happening and me, which I think I talked about when we spoke before, was COVID happening and me realizing I don't have control, and then figuring out, that other people had things far worse off, similar to what you had discovered at a young age. And then realizing that I needed to do something to help and create impact, and then go down that journey a few years back. But I think a lot of people are like where you were or where I was, that they just kind of go through daily life. It's not a bad life. It's, by societal standards, it's probably good in many ways. But it's probably lacking something. It's lacking that true purpose, that true fulfillment that really creates that incredible, 4K, crazy 3D. I mean, just a beautiful rainbow kind of life. And I think that's, sadly, I feel that's a lot of people. That may be the majority of people out there. Luckily, in the past few years, I've encountered many people that are in the minority, right? That are creating purpose, do have that fulfillment, are, living their dreams and their passion, and on that similar journey. And, as I feel you are as well. So what advice would you give? And you've already shared a lot of great advice for, people to sift through, but what advice would you give to a person that hasn't gotten to that aha moment? And if there was a specific catalyst that sparked that, then, by all means, please share that. But what advice would you give to someone they're in kind of that time of, I don't really know how, I don't know this, I'm still trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. What would you share with them?
I work with a lot of people who struggle with having too many ideas and who are in that space because they see so many options for what they can be their purpose, but they don't necessarily know how to chase those options. And I think the biggest advice I tend to give people is to really understand that you don't need to do all of them, or you don't need to, have all of it done at the same time, or it doesn't need to be beautiful with a little bow on it. It can be a bit messy at first, but you do need to choose, and you do need to prioritize, and you do need to have some direction and take action ultimately, because a lot of people, like you said, we're phoning it in, right? We're going to work, we have this 6-figure salary, we're sitting at a desk all day, we're doing what somebody else tells us. And that's a pretty easier existence than choosing your own road, to be honest. It's a little scary out here when you're on your own and you don't have someone telling you how to do every step, and you do question your ability to do what you want to do, or your confidence. And so if you haven't found that purpose yet, it can keep you in that space of just doing the daily routine, like you said, coming to work and doing all these other things that seem like the American dream, or the way you're supposed to format your life as an adult, pay the bills, buy a house, get married, all of that stuff. But in the end, if that's not fulfilling for you, then you do need to sort through your brain and sort through all the ideas of what is going to bring fulfillment and purpose, and then choose something to try, right? Like, you have to find a starting point. And I think that was what I struggled with for a really long time. And for me, the starting point was blogging, oddly. That was where I found an outlet, started really exploring and understanding entrepreneurship, and to take one of my ideas and put it into action. But a lot of the time, people don't have a clear one to start with. And so that would be my biggest advice, is to really better understand, go through a process, work with a coach, whatever you need to do, but understand that you do have a lot of options, and there is going to be one that will help you become more fulfilled or work towards your purpose. And to then find out which one that is, or even find a couple and explore them and see what becomes more fulfilling for you, or how you feel more connected to your purpose. And in that exploration, being curious, being open to new experiences, having a growth mindset, really working on your mindset and how you show up to fulfill this purpose, those are important steps. And so you kind of have to figure out where to start, and then just go through the steps in order to get yourself to where you want to go.
That's excellent advice, and I know that will be beneficial for our listeners. So I want to dig into that last thing you said. If someone is struggling, and I get this question all the time from people, if someone is struggling with, and then I want to dive into purpose, but if someone is struggling with finding that one thing, how did you figure out that it was blogging for you?
Yeah, I'm a natural writer. I know that a lot of people just like to read what I write, and it's taken years to understand that, but I figured that out when I worked for the federal government, that there's a lot of people who just want me to write beautiful words for them. And I actually in high school was told I was a horrible writer, right? I was very terse, and I had a very specific style of how I write. And it's very truthful and honest and authentic, but it's also just a very particular voice. And I always thought people are not going to want to read what I want to write. And then when I started understanding in the government that I have this knack for explaining things in words that people, read and go, aha, it makes sense. Or, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is a great instruction manual. Or, I understood technical writing, but I didn't have an outlet for the creative process or the creative writing. And so in that desire to explore more of my creative and free, mind to communicate what I want to communicate with the world, that's how I decided to start a blog. And I made several attempts at blogging before, but I never really went all in and was like, this is my blog and I'm going to monetize it and I'm going to build a business around it and all of those things. So when I started that process, it was inspired by another blogger. And I, really dug into what does this mean as a medium to communicate ideas to people. And I like liked it, and I got a lot of positive reinforcement, and I started feeling the same thing people would say with my technical writing. I started feeling the same things and hearing the same feedback from my creative writing. And I said, and even more so, actually, people liked it even more. And I was like, okay, there's something here. There's something to explore here that I need to continue to explore. And so even now in my business, I write all my own blogs. I really focus heavily on my writing and my marketing, because it is an outlet both for me creatively, but also it's a way for me to explain and give information in a very low barrier way so that people can have the resources that they need to go on their journey. And so I've still transformed the purpose of blogging and the fulfillment that I get from it into something that's going to help me build my business now. And so it's kind of been a long journey with that idea, but I've been sticking with it for probably now. I started blogging in about really seriously in about 2018. So before the pandemic, and I've definitely stuck with it since then. And so now when I go and Google my name, there's like a whole bunch of content that comes up that, didn't exist in the world before. And so I feel like it's reinforced my ability to keep using that medium.
Yeah, that sounds like maybe there's a book in your future after all those blogs.
I have written several book chapters, but there is in my future a solo book. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, it's coming.
Awesome. So it sounds like you're fulfilling part of our category of being a social impact hero of honoring your purpose. The H, our hero, is an acronym, and you're definitely honoring your purpose. And I do want to get into a couple questions about the other components of being a hero, but I do want to go back to purpose. So just a question for you is you mentioned finding your purpose, and for many years, I always thought purpose was something that you find, right? That you find. And then someone challenged me on that, and they said, no, purpose is something you create. Mm-hmm. And that was a few years back. And now I firmly believe that they're right, that purpose is something that you create every day. And I think your story exemplifies that. As a good example of creating purpose, because you weren't sure if blogging was going to be it, but you said, hey, I'm just going to try it. And then over the process of blogging for, a few years and everything, to me, that says that you essentially created that purpose in your life. But how do you see it? Do you see it as purpose being something that you find, or something that one creates?
It's a really great question, because I think it's a bit of both for me in my journey. There have been times where I felt very connected to my purpose, and I knew that in that moment I was fulfilling my purpose at that time. But there have been times where I know I've created my own destiny and kind of just went out on a limb and did my own thing. And that also led me to my purpose. And so in my experience, it's been both. And I can tell you, even what comes to mind is when I was living in Uganda in a village with no power, no water, doing a needs assessment for schools at the age of 25. It was the very first time I had left the United States. I decided to go as far as possible. And I went and lived, in the middle of Uganda, in a very rural part of it. And that was actually the most probably fulfilling time that I've ever had in my entire life. And I knew that what I was doing was serving not only my purpose, but also helping other people serve their purpose as well. And even just this week, I had one of the young men who lived in the parish with me, in the Catholic parish I lived in, who used to bring us, new and do daily tasks for us. I sponsored his school fees for the rest of the time that he was in school after I left Uganda. So there I am, struggling as a new, I came back and worked for the government. So I was very low in my salary. So I was struggling on my own here in America, but I was still sending money back to Uganda so that he could fulfill his purpose. And he did for a number of years. He served, in his faith. And then now he's getting ready to transition actually into entrepreneurship. And he reached out and said, I'm looking at you for inspiration as you've moved into different chapters of your life. You're exploring entrepreneurship. I'm going in that direction. I'm leaving what I was doing before. And it was just such a nice kind of like a 360 for me to understand that, in that experience in Uganda, there were so many times that I didn't know I was influencing people, or I was helping people, I was supporting people. But through my journey, those people have kind of stayed in the periphery, and we've connected multiple times. And I feel like there was just a very purpose-driven reason why I didn't choose anywhere else in the world to study abroad. I just decided to be all the way as far as possible, and go through all of the things that included in that experience, because it was not about me and my purpose, but again, it was about me helping others to achieve their purpose. And so in that experience, I sort of maybe created it because I decided to go, but really I feel like I more stumbled upon it, to be honest. I kind of got off the plane with my 100 pounds of luggage. It was like, here I am. And the purpose was there. It's like I had to go that far to discover it, or to uncover it, or to embrace it. And even now, as I reflect back on that experience, it was such an early in my adulthood pivotal time that I draw on that experience every day, right? All the time. Absolutely talk about it. People have heard the Uganda stories multiple times if they listen to my content, but it's because for me, that was one of the most connected I've ever been to my purpose. And then of course now, I really am more creating my purpose and moving towards helping explain what my purpose is here on earth, and helping people to use that as a catalyst for them to find their own purpose. So for me, it's really been a bit of both.
And I may, it may be one of those chicken or the egg kind of questions, right? To people who wrestle with back and forth. I'd like to say that you ending up in Uganda, at least from my perspective, that would be what I would call, divine choreography. That's part of God's plan, and He knows it far in advance than you did, or you had to figure out down the road. But I used to be amazed when things would happen like that, looking back in hindsight, and less and less. And I don't know if it's just growing in my faith or what have you, but it's still amazing. But it's not. I see that. Oh yeah, that was just meant to happen, because that what was part of His plan. So that's how I see it. That when these things come back, I'm like, oh, all the dots connect perfectly. They were meant to lay out. The timing was perfect, even though at the time you'd say like, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected, or why am I having to go through this, or what is happening here? But then it all lays out perfectly. So thank you for sharing that and answering that question.
No, I totally agree about that.
Yeah, fantastic. So I do want to touch briefly on the components of being a hero. We talked about your honoring your purpose. I know you're active on social media and everything, so you're definitely engaging your audience and your mission. But the one question I have about that is, was that something that you were always comfortable with, or did you have to grow in saying, hey, I'm going to put out all this content? And obviously you were writing first, but the other types of content.
Yeah, video was really hard for me. I think I struggle as a woman with looks, right? It's like I have to have my makeup on and my hair done in order for me to get on camera. And that was the mentality that I had for a really long time when I first started the business, and realizing that my face is part of my marketing, right? And my presence. And I was like, gosh, why can't I just be like a dude and put my hair up and no makeup and be like, fine, yeah, exactly. Just show up in a shirt. Doesn't matter what I'm wearing. And I started noticing over time that people really resonate with when I actually am dolled up. And then I just have had to grow into and accept that fact, right? And so I do create content both with my makeup on, not makeup, it's sort of the authenticity piece. But I know that the content that I create when I'm well-dressed and appearing to, like everything is awesome and nothing is wrong, that is content that does better. And that was a cognitive dissonance for me, because I wanted people to just not care, right? I wanted them to just deal with, oh, Wendie's, this or whatever, and listen to my message. But I realized that that wasn't always the case when I started looking at my data and my numbers. And as I got more comfortable with creating content, I said, well, how can I use this to my advantage? How can I really play into the idea of, people do like beautiful things, and people do like to look at things that are aesthetically pleasing. And so I had to change how I created the content. So when I'm doing something like this and I'm already dolled up, I'll create content. If I'm not and I'm hanging out in my jeans, I'll create something that, little story or whatever, but nothing that's a big piece of content. And so for me, it was understanding what resonated with people and how I could best deliver my message, and not judging that and not judging myself and feeling like that's okay, right? Like that's okay that this is the trend. Maybe one day people will love my, my content. That's not, I have this one video that went like really crazy, and it was because I was in my bikini on my paddleboard, right? And I'm like, okay, this is just where we're at as a society, that we like to look at women in this way. And so I've come to terms with it. I think a lot of the time it stopped me from creating content really early, and that was a struggle. But I think with written content and with video content and even with audio content, I've had to find my path on what is comfortable for me as a creator and what is comfortable for my message and my brand, and how do I best bring all those together for the experience of delivering what I'm here to deliver. And again, taking the judgment out of that for myself so that I can just flow in the creative process, but also feel like, I kind of don't care about the metrics at this point, to be honest, but I use them as a way to kind of reinforce what does best deliver my message.
Yeah, and I appreciate your honesty in answering that question. And I think, in the end, as long as your message is your message, however it comes out, whether you're on a paddleboard or, dressed up in a business suit or, t-shirt and jeans, whatever, that it's going to resonate with the right people. And, and that's what's going to matter in the end. And yeah, I know we analyze the data and the algorithms and all this stuff and try to understand it. And, it is what it is. But I think as long as you're being authentic, like you said, to yourself and your message, then, you can't go wrong. And I think that's what, that shows that you are rippling your message out, and your message is about positive change. So that was really an easy one to kind of check that box of, yes, you are doing the R as a hero. And I'd say and I knew this was how it would be on our conversation today, is that you would open up, that you wouldn't be someone that would, limit what you're sharing, or not want to open your heart to the world. And so you've definitely checked every box, HERO of being a hero, which that was pretty obvious. So as we come towards some of these questions that I ask all guests on the iSpark Change podcast, I'm curious. You've mentioned, and it's always interesting to me because I always save this question for the end, but 95% of my guests, they always have like 2 or 3 that they've already shared throughout the episode. And on the show, we talk about spark moments, about those spark moments in life, those moments where, our actions or someone else's actions have that ripple effect that goes far beyond the initial act, and continues to have an impact on that life, right? Whether it's yours or someone else's, far beyond. So share a story of, positive change, of an example of a spark moment where, either someone else had an impact in your life, or you had an impact on someone else's life, where it's really kind of changed the trajectory of, one life or another.
So I'm being told to give you options, and I will give you 3 options, Rick, and you can pick your 1 or 2 that you want to have on your podcast. So do you want one story involving Bradley Cooper and President Obama? Do you want the story involving the Sandy Hook parents? Or do you want the story of a young boy whose parents are autistic? Or they're actually autistic and they had schizophrenia?
Okay, although the first 2 sound very interesting, especially Bradley Cooper and President Obama, I'm going to go with the third one. With the third one.
I figured you would.
That touches my heart the most. So
I had an experience when I was in college and grad school at Columbia. You have to do a clinical placement for the first year of social work school. Everybody does this. And I always told them, well, I'm not going to be a clinician. I'm a macro level policy person. So why am I doing this clinical placement? What am I doing here? So they put me into a nonprofit that serves women who have been exposed to and live through domestic violence. And as I was doing my clinical placement, I started working with children who had been in households where they were experiencing domestic violence. And there was a young boy who parents, like both between the two of them, had autism and schizophrenia. And there was no real clear answer to what his disposition was going to be over the course of time, whether any of this would impact him. But he was fairly young. He was about 6, 7. And he was struggling with attaching to people. He was struggling with his educational experience. He was struggling with behavioral issues, and that's quite a bit of violent behavior. And so he came to play therapy. And his caseworker, who was a case manager, said, I'm not sure if you're even going to be able to get through to this kid, but I have a feeling that he's going to connect with you. And I'm going to ask if you could be his counselor versus the other options. And I said, okay, I'm a first-year social worker. I'd been told I don't really even know what I'm doing in this role. So I was not super confident in my clinical skills, but boy, do I know how to play, right? Like that is what asset I do have, is I know how to have fun. And my goal was just to sit in that space and have fun with this young person and to help him just to connect even to the activity that we were doing, right? He didn't have to connect to me, but he just needed to be able to connect to something and to really understand his emotions. And so we would start small in our sessions and identifying emotions as we're playing with Play-Doh and, working through, little activities that we were doing. And over time, he was able to express emotions a little bit more. And when I got to the end of my year and it was time for me to, go into summer break and not be at this agency anymore, we have our last session and he says, I want to play with beads. And I said, okay, let's play with beads. Let's get the beads out. Let's do some things, So we're kind of like stringing beads along, and I'm talking to him about, what his experience was at school and, what he had been feeling that week and all of those things. Then, at the end of the session, when I'm telling him that we're not going to see each other anymore, he said, I'm sad. And I said, well, I was really like, you should have seen the grin on my face when this kid says he's sad, right? But it wasn't because he was sad. It was because he could identify the feeling, right? He had a word for it and he could express it to me verbally. And I was like, oh my God, I had a breakthrough, right? I was very excited about this breakthrough. But then he said, I'm sad, but I'm happy that I met you. And he actually gave me his bracelet. He gave me his necklace. And so this is something that I keep with me. And I get so emotional when I talk about it. I keep this at every workstation. For the past 20 years, I've taken this with me because to me, a kid who can't attach, a kid who can't identify emotion, a kid who can't use his assets and doesn't have protective factors, that's what this is. And how many of those kids do we have in this world, right? How many of the kids like him will not be able to get here? And that's what this symbolizes. So yeah, so thanks for making me cry today, Rick. But but it's just
you're making me cry.
But it is
story.
This is one of my career rocks, right? Like this gets me through a lot of hard times, and it continues to inspire me to this day.
Well, I know that will inspire our audience. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for, opening your heart and being so real with everybody, because I know they will appreciate that as I do too. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, Wendie. And I have to, I'm so glad that I had you on the show because, as you've probably heard, and I know I've told you, our goal at iSpark Change is to impact 1 billion people over the next 5 years through our community and our work. And we know we can't do that alone. We know we need social impact leaders like you that are showing people the way. So, you're going to help others make a difference. So how can our audience connect with you? Where can they find you? Where's the best place?
Well, I'm on every social media platform. So any platform that you're on, I'm probably there under Wendie Veloz, Wendie with an IE, and my last name is Veloz. So if you look for Wendie Veloz pretty much anywhere in Google, anywhere on LinkedIn, Instagram, all those places, you'll find me. And I'm just here to support the helpers, right? I'm here to help the helpers, people who need to understand the technical ways to do this work, but also need to understand the ways to really open your heart and to be able to follow your passion and to take all those ideas and turn them into action. And so, anybody who that seems to resonate with, find me anywhere, and I'll be happy to support in any way I can.
Fantastic. Thank you. And if you go to her website, wendieveloz.com, it explains everything beautifully, shows the different ways she can help you and everything. So, definitely go check that out. So as I was saying, being a social impact leader, we value your thoughts and your opinions on the podcast, as do all of our listeners. So I'm going to ask you our final question, and that's to peer into the future of social impact and our iSpark Change crystal ball here, and tell us, what can the world become if everyone begins to believe that they have an impact on the future?
I see it as a little hill of army ants, right? And I think that it's like we're all here doing our work in the space of our influence, our sphere of control. And then if we're able to really come together, and I know because I've listened to your podcast, I know you believe this too, when we're able to come together in that collective impact space, that's where the power is. And instead of it turning into a big anthill, in my head, we turn into this massive Megatron transformer. It was like really a force to be reckoned with, like you cannot stop, right? It's going to change something. So I believe that the power is in the collective and the ability to create community like you are, like my community, to bring everyone together onto this agenda of, what is transformation? Where are we going as a society? How are we helping fulfill all these purposes and solve a bunch of problems that we've created? Quite frankly, a lot of us maybe haven't contributed to them, but we can definitely be the solution for them. And I think that that's really what I see the future is that collective and the collective power. And you and I and others like us are the catalyst for the glue for bringing together that transformer, right? So we're being able to take the pieces and bring it together as a whole. And that's really my vision for it.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. And we're on the same page. And so I know that that's going to resonate with the audience for sure. So Wendie, thank you for taking the time to share your heart and wisdom with our audience today. You came in, you over-delivered, as I knew you would. Your desire to be impactful is evident. You're filled with passion, determination, and you lead with a heart of service and gratitude, which tells me that you are going to continue to have success in all facets of life. And this is only the beginning of your social impact. So, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. This has been a great interview, and I'm really excited to share all of this with your audience, because I know there's so many people who are just absolutely in line with both of our visions, and I hope that this helps inspire them to take action.
Yes, I know it will. Thank you so much. All right, Impact Heroes, it's our stories that connect us all, and we loved hearing Wendie's today. Wendie Veloz, you're not only an inspiring and amazing human being, you truly are an iSpark Change social impact hero. We'll see you all next time.
Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.